Hey there, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and yeah, time to talk about Drake. I'm exhausted, and it's Billboard BREAKDOwn. I don't remember. You know, I spent about a half hour in my last video essay on my main channel talking about Drake. It coincidentally focuses on exploring Canada, multiculturalism, over a dozen albums by Canadian acts, and my adage that the Canadian charts are always better. Link in the corner. Please go like and subscribe over there if you're looking for less frequent but way more in-depth analysis. But I knew deep down that I would have to make this too. I saw the streaming numbers. I knew Drake was going to get his triple album bomb. For context, I've been covering said album bomb since 2015, over 10 years. I put in more than enough time and have more than enough cred in this territory talking about Drake. And there's a lot that can be said about this moment. If you want to say that the charts don't matter anymore because Drake can do this, especially just run up the score at the very top, a #1 hit, that it doesn't matter, well, let's actually push back on that a bit. Because a lot of classic songs never actually went to the top, and you'd be shocked at the songs that you forgot that did become #1 hits, even in the past couple of years. And that Billboard and the Hot 100 has always been a flawed institution, especially with what songs counted which way or another, and by how much. And even then, I think the average music fan underestimates the consuming power of the general public and how rarely it aligns with their potentially more refined taste. But I'm also not denying that it feels like it should matter more, you know, like the Grammys, that when the game is being cheesed, you feel some type of way. I've been covering the charts for over a decade. It's clear that I've got some investment in them being better as a system. It is so frustrating to see institutional rot across so many channels, so many things that need to be fixed, so many questionable or outright bad actors. And yet it's like foul baiting in sports. I'm annoyed when players do it, but I'm angry when it works, because it's proof that the system's got flaws, and you have to ask the question why said flaws haven't been addressed, especially when it becomes a factor in creating records or legacy, and especially when there are folks who just want to root for the winning side regardless, especially for the casual fans who are the primary consuming demographic of everything and who stopped caring about questions of Drake's cultural legitimacy at least a year ago. Hence we got this week. And if Drake wants to make history, yeah, okay, happy to oblige him. Not exactly in the way he'll expect, especially if he happens to be watching this. But until we get there, our top 10, and this is going to be very quick, there are 9 new Drake songs, and you can literally track their order by looking at the streaming charts. You sure as hell are not seeing this being driven through a major radio push. But let's push through them in order and talk about the only exception. Janice Shut the Fuck Up is Drake's newest #1, also the only one that sold substantially well, will probably have the best shot at holding on to a top 10 spot longer term if the streaming's there. Ran to Atlanta with Future and Molly Santana at #2, Whisper My Name at #3, and Shebang at #4. Then we have our solitary non-Drake top 10 survivor, Shoes in Texas by Ella Langley, because despite Nashville radio pulling back and broadly seeing some decline in all channels, she still has enough inertia to hold position and will likely rebound right back to the top next week. She's also got the only song outside of returns and debuts that did not fall more than 10 spots this week. But before we get into all that, the rest of the Drake top 10. National Treasures at #6, Make Them Cry at #7, Dust at #8, Too Hard for the Radio at #9, and Make Them Pay at #10. And this is where we're going to get to our losers and dropouts, and the one thing I'm mostly happy that Drake did this week. Clear out a bunch of songs that I'm thoroughly done with from last year. Finally, Ordinary by Alex Warren is gone, alongside Golden from K-Pop Demon Hunters, The Fate of Ophelia, and Opalite by Taylor Swift, Daisies by Justin Bieber, The Fall by Cody Johnson, I Ain't Coming Back by Morgan Wallen and Post Malone. But probably the biggest song that feels most from this year is What You Sayin' by Lil Uzi Vert, which will still comfortably make the year-end list for this year. Now this should open things up for a lot of new arrivals, or at least the chart to get more interesting as Drake will fall back. But in the meantime, we got our losers, where it's literally over half the Hot 100. Now, the reality is that so many of these songs will rebound that it's functionally irrelevant just to run through all of them for 1 week, just listing them off. So I'm going to focus on the songs that either saw activity from last week or lost by 25 positions or more, a quarter of the chart, and will probably need more than just a rebound to recover the loss of momentum. In the former group, let's talk about the one debut that stuck around, that's Cinderella by the late Mac Miller and Ty Dolla $ign. Sadly, a little too ironic. Then we got the continued losers, which might as well be the remnants of Noah Kahan's album bomb. Doors at 58, Porch Light at 90, End of August 94, American Cars at 99, and Dashboard at 100. Will be very interesting to see how many of these rebound next week, I gotta say. Then we get the gains that got short-circuited, like Brunette by Tucker Wetmore at 59, Don't We by Morgan Wallen at 69, Lush Life by Zara Larsson at 75, Orbiter by Noah Kahan at 83, and Hate How You Look by Josh Ross at 91. Look, another Canadian casualty. The rest are our big Drake losers, and there are a lot of them, starting with more Noah Kahan with The Great Divide at 52 and Willing and Able at 86, Be By You by Luke Combs at 54, Freaking Out by Dexter and the Moon Rocks at 60, American Girls by Harry Styles at 62, I Love It, I Love It, I Love It by Bella K at 64, still think she's about to have a pretty big year, Body by Don Toliver at 68, Die On This Hill by Sienna Spiro, finally nearing its exit at 70, Dandelion and Bottom of Your Boots by Ella Langley at 73 and 78 respectively. Then there's Let 'Em Know by T.I. at 79, Elizabeth Taylor by Taylor Swift at 81, White Keys by Dominic Fike at 87, Beautiful Things by Megan Moroney at 95, Rain Dance by Dave and Thames at 96, MacArthur by Hardy, Eric Church, Morgan Wallen, and Tim McGraw at 97, and Dry Spell by Casey Musgraves at 98. Hell, that still felt like listing so many of these off. What am I even doing here? Anyway, we got no gains this week. The only returns are from Drake, with What Did I Miss at 15 and Which One Was Central C back at 63, which means we're stuck dealing with the big album bomb stipulations. And I know what you're thinking, because the triple album bomb might make this complicated, skirting around a lot of my pre-established rules about whether or not a certain number of songs within the top 40 or top 20, and when I realized I was trying to identify which songs went to which album by their titles, and still kind of struggling, it became clear that we had to simplify this process. So after dealing with Drake album bombs for What a Time to Be Alive with Future, Views, More Life, Scorpion, Dark Lane demo tape, Certified Lover Boy, Honestly Nevermind, Her Loss with 21 Savage, For All the Dogs, and Some Sexy Songs for You with Party Next Door, I mean, I'll give them the lightest of the passes because there weren't quite enough songs from If You're Reading This It's Too Late. For the sake of my sanity, for the self-care, and really the audience, all of you, I'm announcing a new rule for Billboard Breakdown that hopefully will be sparingly applied, you know, like Billboard's recurrency at the very top. If an artist debuts over 24 new songs within a week, no playing cheap little games with however you choose to package them, be it on one album or three, I'm focusing on the best, the worst, the top 10. I could have done it for Taylor Swift, maybe Morgan Wallen, but if I'm considering the history of all this, it really deserves to be called the Drake Rule. You want to make history, dude? You want to make your chart records? Welcome to the consequences of your actions. Really feel like you should have faced a lot more of them. So with all that being said, there's still a whole lot of Drake that I'm just not going to talk about this week. And if you want to see my aggregated thoughts, please go check out that video essay where I already went on at length talking about all three albums. You cannot make the argument I've not given this my fair due diligence. But part of the consequences going through this is that I'm not really going to be talking about the best songs from Habibti or Maid of Honor. Mostly because I think the best rap tracks from ICEMAN kind of trump them. I'll go back to those to be discussed sooner than compared to like a prioritizing or a true bestie. What I will do is list the songs from each album that I am not covering as follows. From ICEMAN, Burning Bridges at 13, Bees on the Table with 21 Savage at 12, 21, please go work with someone who will actually force you to try. Jid is right there. Plot Twist at 11, Lil Birdie at 18, Don't Worry at 23, Firm Friends at 31, and Make Them Know at 21. My God, I thought that last one had to be a real favorite, but a couple of those lines there. Okay. From Habib T, Rusty Intro at 71, WNBA at 28, I'm Spent with Low Shimmy at 34, Classic at 35, Slap the City with Qendresa at 39, High Fives at 43. That's a run that are all dangerously close to the bottom spots. Gen 5 at 56, White Bone at 57, Fortworth with Party Next Door at 36, and the previously mentioned Prioritizing at 82. Then there's Maid of Honor, which, judging by how lukewarm the charts have been to it, maybe I and the majority of critics who think that the album could have the most staying power are a little bit mistaken, because it seems to have performed the worst broadly overall. And when I'm not talking about Hoe Phase at 22, Road Trips at 42, Outside Tweaking at 65, Amazing Shape of Popcaan at 76, BBW at 74, True Bestie with Iconic Savi at 67, New Bestie at 72, Q&A at 85, Goose and the Juice at 88, and the worst performing Drake song this week, Stuck, 93. Now that thankfully makes this list of new arrivals, yeah, still plenty long and overstuffed with a lot of Drake. Let's work through this together. I believe in you. I mean, subscribe and support the Patreon if you want to believe in me and keep informed on this exercise in weekly suffering. But let's start with number 92, Princess by Drake.
Found my princess laying in the bathroom, she's off the shit. Yeah.
So here's the huge problem with considering the worst of what Drake shoveled out this week. When you have between 6 to 8 songs that you could describe as flat out terrible that are competing for the absolute bottom spots, I can't rely on a calculus only measuring for the least good. I need to find the dregs that actively piss me off. So for as much as Sexyy Red is flipping the cha-cha slide is humiliating and Drake's sad attempt for a modern strip club jam, Cheetah Prince's not on this list. Neither is Slap That City, despite Qendresa sounding completely off key on that song on the hook. You need to go deeper here. So when I say that Maid of Honor, this album closer Princess, is one of the worst songs Drake has ever made, I don't say that lightly. For one, after an album attempting to hop on every dance trend, this is an attempt at a sullen, slow burn pop rock song with the jagged guitars that sound like they're only partially plugged in. Trippie Redd and Machine Gun Kelly collaborating could make something better than this. It doesn't just sound bad, it sounds amateurish in the wrong way. So I thought I had to be trying to do something like what Kanye did and taking a slapdash rock texture then auto-tuned crooning over it, at least up until the perfunctory beat switch just submerges it all. But then we gotta consider the content in context. Maid of Honor is Drake's Bachelor for Life album with increasing desperation, and he uses this to set up the grimmest of downbeat endings if he did fall in love. His princess passed out on the bathroom floor, where despite giving her seemingly everything, setting her up, she's spiraling, she implodes, she can't ever fully make him happy. And that's the tragedy, because he fell in love again. This is the consequences. No, dude. The framing of this sets me up to care way more about the woman passed out on your floor. Don't you care at all? Is this what you think commitment with you must ultimately lead to? This feels like the shocking twist ending that's not only unearned, but truly repugnant in how Drake sees women. And the song sounds like absolute shit to boot. I don't even think the fans tolerated this at the end of their dance album. For damn good reason. Number 61, Hurrr Nor Thurrr by Drake featuring Sexyy Red.
Right there, yeah, that. Right there, that's good. For me, you should. Right here, right there. Don't stop right here.
I was very tempted to just let this one slide. It's easily the most boring of the worst songs from these 3 albums, with Drake in sleepy R&B mode against the wispy vocal warble with a very spare bass knock and trap percussion. And truthfully, not even really about his content, where he's anticipating hooking up with an NBA player's girlfriend, where apparently he bought her a car, but wants her to keep her integrity. But then you get lines like, your friends, they be gathering evidence on me to take you away. You mean rescue her from you? Seems like instead of you being concerned about her good name, you could actually, I don't know, do the work, rehabilitate your own name, but we can't have that. Instead, we get the truly embarrassing, got X-Men issues like Marvel. That's not even wordplay to chain it up with another comic book reference. It's a lazy pun. What about the X-Men or Marvel is remotely tied to this, especially as you then lean into mafioso posturing. Then Sexyy Red shows up and look, the content with her is never the issue. That's what the haters get wrong. It was the refusal to develop behind the mic with more technique or flair. And when she sounds so lifeless as she does here, having me wonder if she's on all the drugs she references on the verse, what does she even add beyond a gamma placement so Drake gets another chunk from the back end? This doesn't even give Sexyy Red fans what they would want, and all the haters more ammo to believe her 15 minutes are long over. Either way, this goddamn sucks. Number 48, Hit the Wall by Gracie Abrams.
I'm not a problem you can solve, weighing the cost impossible. I hit the wall, I hit the wall.
Yeah, the only song we're getting this week that's not from Drake, Gracie Abrams. The bar is in hell, everyone. Apparently the next Gracie Abrams project is called Daughter from Hell. Probably not the best idea to highlight the fact that nepotism is the key factor behind your career and all your connections, especially having seen you live last year at Osheaga and being profoundly unimpressed. But I just found it laughable that this would have anything close to hellish energy. I didn't buy it. And that's completely true. But if I'm judging this by the low standards I had for Gracie Abrams, I will say there's a couple elements here I kind of like. Aaron Dessner's hushed, fluttery keys and guitars, they present a fine backdrop to keep the tempo up. And I really like the melodic swerve on the bridge. It was enough to have me hope that this song could do something with an actual crescendo, but that will require Gracie Abrams to actually let loose when I'm not convinced she can do that. And I genuinely mean that sincerely in terms of her content. This reminds me a little bit of In My Blood by Shawn Mendes for how much the neurotic anxiety in both text and subtext comes across this song. But Abrams sounds so purposefully hemmed in, where apparently whenever she is seriously in danger of spiraling or going off the rails, she's then insulated and diagnosed and medicated, which implodes her self-confidence in following relationships and has her pleading in one verse for this guy to stay, and by the end, kind of threats that feel a little toothless. I don't deny that she might feel like she hits the wall and implodes, but there's nothing here to add meat or urgency to her story. Neither the production nor delivery sells it, so it comes across like trying for lyrical intensity, but not enough anywhere else. So yeah, kind of mediocre yet again. Not hearing the staying power here, where the only thing that might hit the wall long term, maybe her career. Number 19, Make Them Remember by Drake.
Squares drawing a line, but we at the root of it now. It feels like I got a lot of even ties, so I don't know if these are wins or not based on what's suitable now.
So now we get the two Drake songs that I will unabashedly say are good and probably could have been great, with this being the best of the Make Them series in my mind, and generally considered the best songs on ICEMAN in terms of the content and rapping with their one extended verse per song. And while I don't love the let-in stuttering trap knock and Drake saying fuck a #1 on Billboard because he considers it rigged or manufactured, pisses me off, because even if the charts are constructed, it's a construction that he's benefited from and bought into for well over a decade and continues to chase, because why else would you release 3 fucking albums instead of cutting this down to the best 18? And I don't even want to touch on the Jewish roots line. God, his politics are so self-serving. Still being able to say this is a really good song speaks to something. It's also where Drake has the most bars in store for both Kendrick Lamar and Joe Budden. I like him throwing the hypocrisy shot at Kendrick for standing next to Dr. Dre. Very relevant when you refer to the monsters at the top of the industry who have just as credible allegations, and the pettiness he unleashes who are those who switched up only to help Kendrick, alongside his perilous balance of morality with commercial grandeur. That's not nothing, even if Drake might be the wrong messenger. Now, some of those iced out crosses lines, they hit, especially when he then follows up by dumping on Joe Budden for some of his antics, and again, hard to disagree. Even Joe Budden seems to have taken it in stride. But the wordplay is just way more consistent. There are way fewer bars that would shatter the atmosphere. And when Drake locks in, he at least makes a credible case. There are 2 songs worth checking out from ICEMAN in my opinion. This is one of them. Number 10, Make Them Pay by Drake.
I got my shit inside arenas like Gilbert Arenas. I remember lobster ravioli up at Serafina. I was in a dream hotel before I was in a loop like a carabiner. Yeah. And shout to all the sweet teens from Wilhelmina who tell me at the white party, Drake, I love the album, man. Well, I mean, you're kinda genius.
But this is certainly not. In what fucking universe has Drake earned the right to use that prominent sample of Denise Williams' Free? A song that has been sampled many times, but made with Stevie Wonder session musicians and assists from Earth, Wind, and Fire. Especially for the subtextual implication that he feels confined by so much of the shit that he either instigated or did to himself. But let's not get too mad too early. If the Make Them series of tracks are generally considered to be the best, the equivalent of the timestamp tracks this time around, this is the glaring exception. Let's start off with the atrocious puns and references. The Gilbert Arenas line, the Jalen Hurts reference, the YMCA reference, the Little Caesars line, the Nevada line, the Sixth Sense line that he was handily beaten to, and the Seven Seas line. All these would render this a pretty rough song for me. You just shatter a mood with 1 or 2 of these references, let alone a half dozen of them. But then you get into the meat of it and realize so much of it is referencing the beef directly, with plenty of bars directed at J. Cole for backing out apparently on Jay-Z's advice. Even if it's tied into Drake shooting at Hoe, I think Jay-Z might know something about surviving a beef with his dignity intact, Drake, even after Super Ugly. But I'm not even mad at that. Nor am I mad by the fake stream allegations. You want to expose the industry when you're not getting as much in your favor anyway? You sound like your other Young Money label mate who is cozying up to the POS in chief. But you know, if we are getting political, in what universe does Drake think he can take the moral high ground against DJ Khaled about the genocide in Gaza when he's using it as a cheap punchline and referencing streaming with Aiden Ross on the line previous despite everything he has done for even a clunkier shot at Rick Ross? It's very clear that so much of this is about a cheap standard of personal morals for thee but not for me. True pretty much across the industry, but sure as shit not implying much in the way of growth or maturity. You have no high ground, which is why Drake is still referencing on this song stealing chains from Pharrell and others down in Virginia. Apparently just fine with letting that colonizer label stick. And yes, we'll absolutely come back to that, but yeah, fucking gross. If this is about payments, it feels more like being in arrears. A better pun than anything on this fucking song. Next. Number 9, Too Hard for the Radio by Drake.
Some shit I wrote about a rich ass nigga that's deep in the game. They call me Drizzy Drake and I'm keeping the name. I sport Nike shoes, I got a mic to use to talk bad about you pussies, I don't like you fools. Got an Oakland show tonight, baby. My young boys from the yacht going crazy.
There was a part of me that knew that Drake would attempt to flip the Bay Area West Coast sound on this album. And that same part of me knew that he'd actually probably do it pretty well. He's a competent enough rapper to do it. Even if the first half of this sounds like it's straight out of the 1980s and the Fresh Prince could have easily had a run. We all heard that remix. I mean, I'll be the guy to say it. I didn't hate it when Cardi B did it with Finesse on that remix. I don't hate the throwback here, especially when Drake is actually sharper on the second half and for once actually sounds like he's having fun. Certainly more than any moment on Maid of Honor. But yeah, I actually like this. The watery groove behind the fizzy snares is fun. The hook's got some bounce. And while it absolutely is not too hard for the radio, it probably could be shipped to said radio when it switches up that 80s stuttering knock and Drake unleashes a slew of shots at DJ Mustard, the clique hoppers from the West Coast that worked with him before and showed that he actually knew this sound, and those who aren't too keen to wind up in the crosshairs now. But circling back to Maid of Honor, I heard so many praise its creativity, but to me it always felt muted for this miserable, increasingly desperate Drake vibe, whereas this abandons that tone for something more gleefully charged. And I don't know, if Drake took more chances and made more songs like this and sounded like he cared, his catalog wouldn't feel like so much of a slog. At least this, I'll defend it. Number 8, Dust by Drake.
Go blow the dust on your planks. What was the year that they say it slaps? Cause I don't remember it going like that. I don't remember one word in your raps. I don't know nothing about you in them tracks. Let's go. Yeah, I am.
So now we gotta run a Drake songs from ICEMAN coming for the rest of the top 10, where I might think they're not good, but they're not atrocious either. Honestly, they give me painfully little to say, where unless you're a diehard fan, I could shuffle them into the other album cuts that have charted the past decade. I reckon you might struggle to pick them out, at least on sound alone. This one, I didn't hate the gauzy R&B flip for the few seconds until Drake dropped into a damn patois for his bragging in a bad Lionel Richie line. And then the mix gets a little slicker and runnier as the stock trap beat rolls in and the bass just swamps the mix. Charming. And that's before the beat switch renders it all the uglier with that synth bass. At least Drake is trying to sing a little bit more here. I liked that, or at least he was until that beat switch. And then he's trying to rap faster and you recognize all the this is the crypto boosting song, where he talks about wanting Sam Bankman-Fried released. You know, the one involved in the FTX exchange fraud, and then said that he is not better nor wiser. I believe him. This is pretty bad. Next, number 7, Make Them Cry by Drake.
To father my mother and treat my son's grandfather like my older brother. The skies are gray in Toronto, they not a golden color. I'm feeling like BTS, cause it took the whole career for me to be so discovered. I know for sure that my parents, they look at me and see an overcomer.
The album opener, the first of the Make Them series, and one that I think I could at least try to defend even beyond the controversy of its closing lines, where apparently Drake's father no longer has the same cancer he was fighting at time of writing and recording. Good for him. That's good news. Fuck cancer. I got nothing against Drake expressing that sentiment in his content either. I do think if you have such a statement on your opening track, it makes more sense to feel more timely, especially if there are other choices that are clearly driven to boost the SEO and traffic, like the lines referencing BTS, mentioning what happened in 2024, including the battle, that very conspicuous Taz's Angels line, the awkward Dora the Explorer line, the promise that he's about to go deeper, and really across the album refuses to do so. Honestly, what I found most revealing at the start were the lines that felt a little bit more self-aware, what I had wanted to hear. His acknowledgement that he's not done healing, and the toxicity he's encouraging is gonna make it worse. His fear of doing psychedelics and only being reflected in his therapist's glasses as he's more interested in considering her hot. That's revealing. I mean, a better album could have at least tried to unpack this, instead of juxtaposing it all to the forefront with a healthy dose of the self-pity and paranoia that has been his stock and standard for damn near a decade. And when the mix is this gauzy synth and spare patter that then flips into a fizzy soul flip that then wallows in this pitched down murk, man, I really wish these beat switches felt more intentional. As it is, I do think the song is decent. Quite frankly, it sets up a better album than we got. Speaking of which, number 6, National Treasures by Drake.
R.I.P. Kobe, but y'all niggas brokey, that's probably why y'all be shacking together. Capo and Leader got habits together like couples vacation, they packing together like rushing to finish, then slap it together. The charges like COVID, they'll catch it together.
Okay, somebody get Drake away from the NBA references. The more he makes, the more I just roll my eyes, especially when on the first half of the song, he has a hard enough trap beat and sneering attitude with the flow that actually mostly works. The Kobe Shaq line is rough, but Drake then goes and shoots at DeMar DeRozan, given his underperformance in the whole LeBronto years. Dude, if you had so much play and personnel decisions post-championship run, and you want to align yourself with them and the Raptors, why didn't you talk Uncle Dennis down from his fleecing operation so Kawhi Leonard could stay in Toronto and try to run it back? We probably wouldn't have had Danny Green, we would have had OG Anunoby active, and you might not be the punchline Scooter Magruder had in his 2019 free agency fans video, where after Kawhi went to the Clippers, the Raptors fan immediately said, "What did Drake say?" We all know. But then the beat switches and he talks more Toronto business. That TPS line is extremely revealing, especially given the scandals that have come out from their internal affairs. I'm gonna leave it there. And Drake drops into filler mode with some of his threats. These are not national treasures, dude. I'm not even sure if they would make a Canadian heritage moment. And while we're here, number 4, Shebang by Drake.
Why do they gas me up? Where does it go? My head. How much I got? A lot. Don't leave again, I won't. Thinking and trying me do like Bryson, pussy ass nigga, and don't.
Probably the catchiest of the worst songs on this album, but my god, this track blows. Yeah, some of this is driven off of my dislike of the Chipmunk sample sounding so tinny against the rickety trap percussion, but I won't deny there's a hook there, even as Drake borrows Quavo for a bunch of Migos punch-ins and ad-libs. No, we're not dodging the colonizer line, but we're still not all the way there yet either. But not only is the flow so goddamn basic and choppy throughout the whole song, this is also where Drake wants to rest on his laurels and his success within the cooked industry, and my god, where does he get off mocking some girl for trying to finesse Polymarket, given how Steak basically bankrolls his gambling habits? Is he honestly trying to mock those at the top of the charts now, being names he doesn't recognize? Apparently unaware that reflects more on him, sounding like Stan Twitter at its most insufferable, the what kind of switch Nintendo line when talking about guns, the reference to I'm Upset, one of his worst ever songs and one of the worst hits of the 2010s from any artist, referencing listening to one of his ops, goes back and forth between A$AP Rocky and Kendrick Lamar, and saying that he skipped most of it, called it mid. You know what, I'm gonna go out on a limb. Even beyond Kendrick, I think A$AP Rocky's Don't Be Dumb is better than any album Drake has released in the last 10 years. And at least he seemed to try harder than all of these prefabricated Drake. This is Drake at his cattiest, but also his laziness. No bombs going off here, more of a whimper. This sucks. Number 3, Whisper My Name by Drake.
With us. Am I a GOAT? Well, probably not. I probably was, but you probably forgot. My white label had to go white label shit when he stepped out his body and finally got hot. Hand me the tools like I'm picking a lock.
Those flat synth melodies sound like that they got the perpetual head cold I do. Why couldn't he get something with a little bit more punch in order to match the guitar phrases that punctuate the mix before that beat switch? Truthfully, I do think this is one of the better songs here, including the line about how he and white bitches have been kissing a lot, which is about as bad as how he then talks about fighting court cases on that track, which got another eye roll out of me given his own. But I think the hook is sharp. I don't hate him apparently addressing Playboy Cardi being two-faced on the first verse. And some of the lines are pretty sharp on the second. But the Louis Farrakhan line stood out. I'll admit I may have initially misread this when I made my video essay, as Drake showing some allegiance with him and attempting to draw a parallel. Turns out it's actually worse than that, trying to point at when Louis Farrakhan was brought in as a mediator during the 90s feuds between Common and Ice Cube, and how that smoke won't get resolved this time around. And look, there are a lot of ugly things to say about Farrakhan's past and politics, especially around Malcolm X, and I am absolutely the wrong person to say them, obviously, but it says a lot about your connection to the black community that you will not concede to that sort of settlement or resolution where everyone stands to gain. If there's a side eye that keeps us out of my favorites, it's that. Number 2, Ran to Atlanta by Drake featuring Future and Molly Santana.
You know what I'm saying? Ask Pluto Bank of 21, you know what I'm saying? I done put up half, what's done is done, you know what I'm saying? 2 cars in the back, 2 in the front, you know what I'm saying? They so down for me, got a punt, you understand.
But I'll say this, I wasn't surprised in the slightest that Future showed up on this song, with a throwaway verse where he outright says that he spent so much time in Turks with so many pills he doesn't even know what day it is. Putting aside your addict kayfabe and justify it however you want, it's pretty damn cynical to collaborate on a song literally referencing your lead artist's colonization behavior in Atlanta for which he was dissed. He's calling you because he wants to see the club. Apparently you're still answering the phone. Anyway, this sucks. The goopy synth has limited menace and punch even as you get the oily minor key progressions around Drake's hook, and the punchlines in the verse are utterly forgettable, and that's before we get to the beat shift to the goopy synth horns and Molly Santana, reminding me a little bit too much of Sway Lee on her verse, the sort of interchangeable club song that is neither quotable nor interesting. A friendly reminder that the Drake stimulus package, especially in recent years, was more tedious than compelling. But you know, we're not quite done yet, because finally number 1, Janice Shut the Fuck Up by Drake.
I'm so green, you gotta teach me, baby. From Vancouver, you a BC, baby. Pull up, Maybach, beep, beep, baby. And my shit came with the heat seats, baby. Swear my label gotta free me, baby. Blow on me just like some green tea, baby.
I remember seeing the projections that this would be the song that went to #1, and look, I guess I'm not surprised. The second verse is all about shooting at Kendrick, drawing references to Damn, saying that white kids listen to his music to feel guilty. That heals Kendrick's soul. That's a shot that hits more often than it doesn't, if we want to keep it 100. And then questioning how much Kendrick really gives back to the streets, which, man, I wish the social safety nets were robust to the point that celebrity charity didn't feel so integral in this society, let alone this rap beef. He also implies that Kendrick had help getting out of his deal. We're just apparently going to ignore the whole mixtape games to get out of Young Money that Drake played with If You're Reading This Is Too Late, Glass Houses. But this also already takes a couple pot shots at Jay-Z. Again, there's apparently been some alleged beef behind the scenes between him and Drake for some time now. Again, if this is your exit from Universal, where you're going to have nothing left to lose, you're going bad with all those mob ties, why not show receipts? Instead of spending the second half of the song in a flexing generic wallow that doesn't land at all. We've heard it all before. And while we're in the territory, why is he rapping on this leaden trap groove, mashed up with greasy synths left over from 2007, with explosion sound effects and horrible vocal filters, and a soprano sample that feels way too thin to sustain anything beyond the meme? Is there a melodic hook here compared to most of the rest of the album? Sure. Is there much else worth selling? Yeah, you can shut the fuck up with any of that. This ain't worth much at all. And that's the week. Unsurprisingly, there's a lot of Drake, and I'm giving a tie for both of the bottom spots. Princess Make Them Pay for the Worst of the Week tie with Shebang, and Hurrr Not Thurrr with Sexyy Red tying for the dishonorable mention. Yet for the best, I will give it to Drake for Make Them Remember, with honorable mention for Too Hard for the Radio. He got those off. I'll give him that. Next week, though, fallout from all this. Brace yourselves for that. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time.